The town of Oakhaven was a sleepy little place. Trees with green leaves lined every street. Houses had neat lawns and white picket fences. Kids rode their bikes down the sidewalks, their laughter echoing in the afternoon sun. It seemed like the most ordinary town in the world. Nothing exciting ever happened here. Or so everyone thought. But Oakhaven had a secret. A big, dark, scary secret. Hidden deep in the woods, far from any prying eyes, was a laboratory. It wasn't just any lab. It was a secret research facility, surrounded by a tall, electric fence. No one in town knew it was there. The locals sometimes talked about strange things they saw near the woods. They spoke of odd-colored lights flashing between the trees at night. They whispered about strange humming noises that seemed to come from underground. Some people said they saw military trucks driving on the old dirt road that led into the forest, always in the dead of night. But these were just stories, right? The kind of spooky tales you tell around a campfire. Most people in Oakhaven just shrugged and went on with their quiet lives. They had no idea that something truly terrifying was being created just a few miles away from the Saragosi homes. The laboratory was called Project Chimera. It was run by a group of scientists who worked for the military. These weren't the friendly scientists you see in movies. These scientists were serious and secretive. They wore stark white lab coats and rarely smiled. They were tasked with a very special project, a project so secret, even the president didn't know all the details. Their goal was to create a new kind of weapon. Not a bomb, not a tank, but something alive, something that could think, hunt, and follow orders, something that would give their side an unbeatable edge. And so, under the peaceful canopy of the Oakhaven woods, this hidden lab buzzed with activity. Inside its sterile white walls, scientists mixed chemicals and studied DNA. They worked day and night, pushing the boundaries of science and nature. They were so focused on their goal that they never stopped to ask themselves a simple question. What would happen if their creation got out? What would happen if their living weapon decided it didn't want to take orders anymore? They were about to find out, the hard way, and the quiet town of Oakhaven would never be the same again. Inside the cold metallic walls of Project Chimera, the air hummed with the sound of computers and machinery. The scientists, led by the stern Dr. Eris Thorne, were working on something they called Subject Serpentis. It was a snake, but it wasn't just any snake. They had taken the DNA of a python, one of the biggest snakes in the world, and mixed it with something else. They had used a special growth hormone and a complex blend of genetic enhancers. Their goal was to create a snake that was not only gigantic, but also incredibly intelligent. A super soldier in reptile form. It was a risky experiment, a dangerous game to play with nature itself. Dr. Thorne believed his creation would be a masterpiece. He imagined a snake so smart it could understand complex commands. A snake so large it could slide through enemy territory undetected, a silent and deadly force. He and his team worked tirelessly, monitoring every stage of the snake's development. They kept it in a huge, reinforced glass enclosure in the main lab. The baby snake started small, but it grew at an alarming rate. Every day it seemed to double in size. Its scales were a strange, shimmering black, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural intelligence. It was both a marvel of science and a terrifying sight to behold. The scientists were proud of their work. They recorded its rapid growth, its increasing strength, and its surprising ability to solve simple puzzles they gave it. They were creating the perfect weapon, but some of the younger scientists felt a creeping sense of dread. They saw the way the snake watched them. Its cold, yellow eyes seemed to follow their every move. It didn't look like a simple animal. It looked like it was thinking. It looked like it was planning. They whispered their concerns to each other in the hallways, far from the ears of Dr. Thorne. They were playing God, and they were afraid of the monster they were creating. But Dr. Thorne ignored their fears. He was blinded by his ambition. He saw only success. He pushed his team harder, demanding more tests, more enhancements. The snake grew larger and larger, its body becoming thick as a tree trunk. Its enclosure, which once seemed so big, was now starting to feel cramped. The military was pleased with the progress reports. They wanted the project accelerated. They wanted their new weapon ready for deployment. No one listened to the quiet warnings. No one saw the danger that was coiling up, ready to strike, right in the heart of their secret lab. The snake, now a mega snake, was a true monster. It was over 50 feet long, its body a thick mass of muscle and dark, glistening scales. Its head was as big as a small car, and its fangs were like sharp daggers. The scientists had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Subject Serpentis was bigger, stronger, and smarter than they had ever imagined. But its intelligence was not the kind they could control. It was a wild, cunning intelligence. The snake had learned to hate its glass prison. It hated the white-coated figures who poked and prodded it. It wanted out. And it was smart enough to figure out how to escape. One stormy night, a power surge hit the laboratory. The lights flickered. The alarms blared for a few seconds before the backup generators kicked in. It was only a moment of chaos, but it was all the snake needed. During that brief power failure, the electronic lock on its massive enclosure short-circuited. With a powerful slam of its body, the snake shattered the supposedly unbreakable glass. Shards flew everywhere. The scientists screamed and ran for their lives. The monster they had created was free. It slithered out of its broken cage, a giant shadow of death in the sterile white lab. The snake was hungry, and it was angry. It moved with terrifying speed, its massive body knocking over tables and smashing expensive equipment. It tasted the air with its forked tongue, smelling the fear of the humans who had created it. The lab's emergency protocols kicked in, steel doors slammed shut, trapping some of the scientists inside. But the snake was too powerful. It smashed through walls as if they were made of paper. It was a force of nature unleashed, a nightmare brought to life. The scientists' dream of a controllable weapon had turned into a horrifying reality. Their creation was out of control. After causing destruction inside the lab, the snake found a way out. It smashed through an exterior wall and slithered into the dark, rain-soaked woods. Once free in the open, it seemed to grow even more. The natural environment, the fresh air, the freedom. It all seemed to supercharge its mutated genes. It grew bigger and bigger, feeding on deer and other wildlife in the forest. The military tried to cover up the incident. They told the world nothing. But a monster was now loose in the woods surrounding the quiet town of Oakhaven. A 50-foot-long, super-intelligent mega snake. And it was only a matter of time before it found its way to the town. Just on the edge of the Oakhaven woods stood the Northwood Girls' Academy. It was a beautiful old school with brick buildings covered in ivy. It had a large green lawn where students often sat and read books. The school was known for its excellent teachers and its peaceful atmosphere. It was a place of learning, friendship, and laughter. On this particular day, the sun was shining brightly. It seemed like just another ordinary Tuesday. Students were in their classrooms, listening to lectures about history and science. They had no idea that danger was silently slithering closer and closer through the trees. The bell rang for lunch. Girls poured out of the classrooms, their chatter filling the long hallways. They grabbed their lunch bags and headed for the cafeteria or the sunny courtyard. Laughter echoed as they shared stories and snacks. Teachers stood in the doorways, smiling as they watched their students. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. The biggest worry for most girls was a pop quiz in math class or what they were going to do over the weekend. The thought of a real monster, a giant snake, was something that only existed in horror movies, not in their safe, little world. In the science classroom on the ground floor, Mrs. Gable was finishing up a lesson on biology. She pointed to a diagram of a normal-sized python on the wall. "As you can see, snakes are fascinating creatures," she said. The girls listened, some interested, others just waiting for the final bell. Outside the classroom window, the woods looked dark and mysterious, a stark contrast to the bright, cheerful school grounds. A few students glanced out the window, their minds wandering. They saw the leaves rustling, but they thought it was just the wind. They didn't see the giant, dark shape moving silently just beyond the fence. As the lunch hour continued, a strange feeling began to settle over the school. A few students near the edge of the woods thought they heard a strange hissing sound. A janitor sweeping the path near the forest line stopped, thinking he saw something massive move in the shadows. He shook his head, blaming it on his tired eyes, but the feeling of unease grew. It was like the calm before a storm. The air grew heavy. The birds in the trees suddenly went silent. Something was wrong. The normal, peaceful day at Northwood Girls' Academy was about to turn into a terrifying nightmare. The attack began without warning. A loud crashing sound echoed from the edge of the school grounds. The metal fence that separated the school from the woods buckled and snapped. The mega snake slithered onto the lawn. It was, a horrifying sight. Its body was as thick as a school bus, and its head towered over the playground equipment. For a moment, everyone froze. Students and teachers stared in disbelief. Was this real? It couldn't be. But then the snake let out a deafening hiss and the spell was broken. Panic erupted. Screams filled the air. The courtyard became a scene of absolute chaos. Students dropped their lunch trays and ran. They scrambled in every direction trying to get back inside the school buildings. Teachers shouted, trying to guide the terrified girls to safety. Inside, everyone get inside now. Their voices cracked with fear. The snake moved with terrifying speed. It wasn't trying to eat anyone, not yet. It seemed confused and angry, lashing out at the strange new environment. Its massive tail swept across the courtyard, sending benches and picnic tables flying through the air like toys. The beautiful, peaceful school had become a war zone in a matter of seconds. Once inside the buildings, the chaos continued. Girls ran through the hallways, crying and screaming. Teachers tried to herd them into classrooms, locking the doors behind them. But the snake was not going to be stopped by a simple locked door. It raised its massive head and smashed through the large windows of the school library. Glass shattered everywhere. Books flew off the shelves. The girls who had taken refuge there screamed in terror as the monstrous head pushed its way into the room, its yellow eyes scanning the scene. The nightmare had followed them inside. The entire school was gripped by fear. In classrooms, teachers and students huddled together in corners, listening to the horrifying sounds of destruction outside. They could hear the snake's powerful body scraping against the brick walls of the school. They could hear its low, angry hiss echoing through the dam. Bravery. Of the side of the building, every distant crash sent fresh waves of terror through them. They were trapped with a monster they couldn't possibly understand. Hope seemed to be slipping away with every passing second. They needed a hero. Or maybe more than one. In the midst of the chaos, a few brave souls refused to give in to fear. One of them was Art Jenkins, the school's head of security. Art was an older man, a former soldier with a calm demeanor and nerves of steel. He had seen a lot in his life, but nothing could have prepared him for a giant mutant snake. Still, his training kicked in. His first and only thought was to protect the children. He grabbed his walkie-talkie and began coordinating with the staff who were still in the hallways, trying to help students. He knew that panicking would only make things worse. They needed a plan. He wasn't alone. Mrs. Gable, the biology teacher, and Ms. Davis, the school's athletic coach, quickly joined him. They were terrified, but the sight of the scared children gave them strength. "We have to get them out," Mrs. Gable said, her voice shaking but determined. "The snake is on the west side of the building. We can evacuate the students from the east exit." Coach Davis nodded. "I can help. I'll get the students from the gym and the classrooms on that side. We need to create a distraction, something to keep the snake busy." Art looked at the two women, a new sense of hope in his eyes. They were not soldiers, but they were brave. The plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. Art would be the bait. He would go out and make as much noise as possible to draw the snake's attention. He would use the school's maintenance golf cart, driving it around the front lawn to create a moving target. While he kept the monster occupied, Mrs. Gable and Coach Davis would lead the evacuation. They would go from classroom to classroom on the far side of the school, quietly gathering the students and leading them out the east doors towards the main road, far away from the monster. It was a huge risk. If the snake lost interest in Art, it could turn on the escaping children. With the plan in place, they sprang into action. Art took a deep breath, clutching a crowbar in one hand. "Keep them safe," he said to the two teachers before heading towards the main entrance. Mrs. Gable and Coach Davis split up, running down the hallways. They tapped softly on classroom doors, whispering instructions to the terrified teachers and students inside. "Be quiet. Follow us. Stay low," they repeated over and over. A silent, organized line of students began to form, a thread of hope in the dark and terrifying halls of Northwood Girls Academy. Their survival depended on the courage of a few ordinary people. Art Jenkins burst out of the main doors and ran towards the maintenance shed. He could hear the snake crashing through the west wing of the school. He had to be fast. He jumped into the small golf cart, fumbling with the keys for a second before the engine sputtered to life. Taking another deep breath, he stomped on the accelerator and zipped out onto the front lawn. "Hey, over here, you big ugly worm!" he shouted at the top of his lungs. He drove in circles, honking the cart's small horn. It was a ridiculous sight. A small man in a tiny cart trying to get the attention of a 50-foot monster. But it worked. The monstrous head of the snake emerged from a shattered classroom window. Its yellow eyes, full of cold fury, locked onto the noisy little cart. It let out an angry hiss and began to pull its massive body out of the building. Art's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept going. He drove back and forth across the lawn, always staying just out of the snake's reach. The snake lunged, its huge head slamming into the ground where the cart had been just a second before. The earth shook with the impact. Art swerved, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was buying time. Precious time. Meanwhile, inside, Coach Davis and Mrs. Gable worked with quiet efficiency. They moved like shadows through the corridors, gathering students. "Stay together. No noise," Coach Davis whispered, her voice firm and reassuring. She used her athletic training to guide the large groups quickly and safely. Mrs. Gable used her calm teacher's voice to soothe the crying, frightened girls. They led them down the east hallway, away from the sounds of Art's desperate battle. They reached the side exit, a heavy double door that led to the street. With a combined effort, they pushed it open, revealing the path to safety. One by one, the students and teachers streamed out of the building. They ran across the parking lot and down the street, not daring to look back. Coach Davis and Mrs. Gable stood at the door, making sure every single student was out. They were the last ones to leave, their eyes scanning the hallways one final time. Only when the school was empty did they run to join the others. Thanks to their bravery and Art's incredible sacrifice, they had done it. They had saved the children. Art kept the snake distracted, a lone hero in a golf cart, fighting a monster to protect his school. Just as the snake cornered Art against the school's main entrance, the sound of sirens filled the air. A convoy of black military trucks and police cars came screeching down the road. Soldiers in tactical gear jumped out, armed with strange-looking rifles. They were not ordinary soldiers, they were a special containment unit from Project Chimera, sent to clean up their mess. They took positions, aiming their high-tech weapons at the giant snake. The snake, confused by the new arrivals, turned its attention away from Art, giving him a chance to scramble to safety behind one of the trucks. The soldiers didn't use bullets. Their rifles fired powerful tranquilizer darts, each one the size of a small bottle. The first few darts bounced off the snake's thick scales, but the soldiers kept firing, aiming for the softer spots around its eyes and mouth. The snake thrashed wildly, its tail whipping through the air and smashing the front of the school. But the tranquilizers were beginning to work. Its movements became slower, more sluggish. Finally, with a loud, groaning hiss, the giant monster collapsed onto the lawn, unconscious. A huge net was dropped from a helicopter and the massive snake was carefully lifted and taken away. The authorities quickly took control of the scene. They put up a perimeter around the school and told the townspeople that there had been a gas leak that caused hallucinations. They interviewed Art, Mrs. Gable, and Coach Davis, telling them that what they saw was not real. They were ordered to sign papers promising never to speak about what truly happened. The secret of Project Chimera had to be protected at all costs. The government and the military worked together to bury the truth, creating a cover story to hide the existence of the mutant mega snake. The town of Oakhaven slowly returned to normal, at least on the surface. The school was repaired, and classes eventually resumed. The official story of the gas leak was what appeared in the newspapers. But the students and staff of Northwood Girls Academy knew the truth. They knew they hadn't imagined the giant snake. They knew they hadn't imagined the terror. And they knew they hadn't imagined the bravery of the three heroes who saved them. The secret of the lab in the woods remained hidden from the world, but the memory of that day was burned into the minds of everyone who was there. Years passed. The Northwood Girls Academy was rebuilt, stronger and more beautiful than before. The town of Oakhaven remained a quiet, peaceful place. The official records said nothing about a giant snake attack, but a legend was born. a story passed down in whispers from one class of students to the next. They called it the Mutant Mega Snake Incident. The story was told on playgrounds and at sleepovers, a spooky tale that was all too real for those who had lived it. The tale wasn't just about a monster, though. It was a story about courage. The heroes of that day were never officially recognized. Art Jenkins continued to work as the school's security guard, a quiet, humble man who simply said he was just doing his job. Mrs. Gable went on teaching biology, though she never looked at the chapter on snakes quite the same way again. Coach Davis continued to inspire students with her strength and determination. They never spoke publicly about what happened, honoring the promise they were forced to make. But the students knew. They looked at these three ordinary people and saw extraordinary heroes. Their bravery became a central part of the legend. The incident became a powerful lesson for the whole community, even for those who only heard the whispers. It was a lesson in how ordinary people can do extraordinary things when faced with unimaginable fear. It showed that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. The story of Art, Mrs. Gable, and Coach Davis working together, risking their lives to save the children, was a testament to the power of teamwork and selflessness. They showed that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear a security guard's uniform or a teacher's blazer. And so, the legend of the Mega Snake lives on. It serves as a strange and thrilling chapter in the town's hidden history. While the world remains unaware of the monster that once terrorized a small school, the people of Oakhaven, and especially the students of Northwood, will never forget. They remember the terror, but, more importantly, they remember the triumph of the human spirit. The incident, born from a dark secret, ultimately became a shining example of bravery, unity, and the incredible strength found in standing together against